Welcome back, viewers, to another AVY Painting Studios video, and this time we're looking at the famous Marauder giant, and I have sourced some wonderful pictures from the original painter Stuart Thomas on his blog, so please go and check that out because it has a lot of history contained in there that Stuart blogs about in his time working at the studio and all the models that he painted there during his time as a studio painter. So this is an actual commission for David over in the US, and I was really happy that he sent this along because I have one in my collection already, and it was really nice to go back and try to paint it exactly or as close to the original color scheme that Stuart did back in the early 90s. Next was to make the flesh tone, which I did out of 3 colors with bronze flesh, serpent bite leather, and blood red, mixing that on my wet palette, just adding a bit of water to thin it out, and then just putting that down as a base coat on my giant on all the flesh areas first. With the end result looking like he's been baked out in the sun, so we're adding some more bronze flesh to that original mix, and we're going to sketch in all the raised areas on the model just to know exactly where those highlights are going to be. Now, before I went any further with the flesh, I really wanted to mark out exactly where the flesh ended and where all the other parts began. So I got some Chaos Black from Wall Colors, and with a very fine brush started lining in all the teeth, hair, eyebrows, wherever the clothing met the flesh, the fingernails, where the chainmail glaive on his hand was, the large tree trunk that he's holding, the sandals, everything had to be black lined. So after all the black lining was done, now it's time to block in all the other colors, starting with his most focal point, which will be his face and head. So the beard and hair was given a base coat of red leather, and after that was dried, I applied some orange brown as a dry brush, or more of a wet brush as I like to call it. I don't remove the paint off the brush so much, I just leave it fairly wet and load it on the brush and start dry brushing over, adding some bronze flesh later just to give that more of a highlight later on. Then, using Stuart's reference photos on his blog, I started blocking in all the colors on his tunic. So there were patches where there were blue, there were patches where there were purple, green, black, yellow, red. Now, when it came to the tree trunk, I gave that a base coat of burnt umber, and ochre and dark green were used for the end of the tree trunk. When I compared my flesh tone to Stuart's paint job, I found that my flesh tone was a bit too light, and I really wanted to bring that back and make it more warmer, so using some of that orange brown, I just really watered that down as a glaze and went over his flesh areas. Then I got to the fun part of doing all the highlights and all the patchwork on his tunic, mainly adding white to the blue, adding yellow to the greens, and that kind of thing. Adding inks if I needed to saturate the colors, make them more vibrant, and ink is a good way to help your blending on your wet palette as well, giving more, making the colors just more saturated but more vibrant. Adding a bit of orange ink to the yellows made that yellow look a lot more richer. And for the reds as well, you can add some orange ink and yellow ink with your highlights, just to give it a bit more of a warmer and more richer color. I hope now you can see the giant sort of slowly coming together, whereas before it was a sort of a big blotchy, sketchy mess initially, but just concentrating on those small areas at first, defining those, highlighting those, making sure they're nice and clean, nice and crisp, and just adding some highlights, give that three-dimensionality to the colors. They sort of pop more as well, which is really important. The dry brushing technique was applied again to the nice textures on this lovely tree trunk here, just adding some ochre and some beige to the brown. And of course, ink is always a wonderful way to make those colors even more richer and giving more depth to your colors as well. We come to the most exciting part for me of miniature painting, and that's doing the freehand, because you're adding really your own personal touch to the model. I try to base it as closely as I could to the wonderful work that Stuart did on the original model for the studio, and I really wanted to keep it as faithful to the original as possible. And yeah, adding these little fleur-de-lis marks, just doing the lines. The lines are quite simple, but the fleur-de-lis is quite a different prospect in terms of technical level. I always suggest that you draw them out on a piece of paper first, get more comfortable, get more confidence in doing the freehand, and then apply it to the model. That'll save you a lot of time going back and forth trying to correct things later on. And lastly, I added the metallics. I used bolt gun metal as the base coat from watercolors on all the areas that were silver, and then I washed them with black and dry brushed them over with mithril silver. And for the gold parts, I used a Citadel paint called Retributor, and when dry I applied a thin wash of burnt umber. And never fear, for Bugman's beer is here. Strapped to his chest there is a nice big keg of Bugman's beer, and I applied the same techniques of painting that as I did with the tree trunk, and I sort of lined in here, as you can see, with some really thinned out burnt umber ink with a very fine brush, all the lettering on the seal. Then came to the tattoos. I did the tattoos as faithful as I could to Stuart's wonderful paint job for the studio with this sort of S mark symbol. Again, I would just sort of line it out on a piece of paper with a pen just to work out the design initially, and then apply that to the model later on. The other tattoo on his other arm, I had to take a photo and use that as a reference as I painted it directly to the arm. Finally started picking out all the extra little details like his teeth and his eyeballs, and giving him eyes and giving him teeth. And that really sort of finished and tied everything together. And I knew I was getting to the final stages of painting this glorious miniature from the 90s. It's still one of the most sought after models in people's collections, whether they play Orc and Goblins or not. It's still revered as one of those classic models that everyone wants to get their hands on. So hopefully you guys out there can find your own copy of this magnificent beast and put it in your collections, paint it up as I did, and put it in your cabinets for all those to adore when they look at it. And for further inspiration, please go and check out Jonny Watson Gaming, as he did a great tutorial on the Marauder Giant, and you can see his beautifully painted model there. Just in closing, in my last studio update for the year, I'll let you know all about eavylead Masterclass and what that's going to entail. Very exciting for the new year. And also, if you're looking for a quote or commission, as I'm a full-time commission painter, please contact me at eavylead@gmail.com. Okay guys, see you in the next video. Take care of yourselves. Enjoy the week. Bye-bye.